Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional that happens to have a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And we've got just 2 more days. Everybody say it with me 2 more days. We hope. We hope it's only just 2 more days because depending on how things go, will depend on how a certain person behaves and whether there'll be prolonged litigation or some other stuff. We don't know. But to regular, normal people, we have 2 more days, right? So, I've been paying very close attention to this election, um, as has most of all of you that are listening or that chime in every week to watch the show and participate in it. And I have this feeling that the national narrative from the corporate media is very different from, or I feel it might be very different from what people on the ground, boots on the ground, grassroots, um, are saying or seeing out in the field. And I really wanted to get some people together that are really doing the grassroots work to discuss with how are things going, what are you hearing, and whatnot. One of my guests is having a bit of a difficult time signing on. So I'm hoping you guys pray for him because he's from the state of Michigan and we really want to hear about what's going on there because that's a very unique situation there. But in the meantime, let me bring my guests on stage that I do have right now. Okay, so I am going to bring on Miss Fennell Norton. All right. Fennell made her mark in 2021 in the state of Virginia when she entered the race for the House of Delegates. Although she didn't win that race, she became a key political player in Virginia. She was welcomed into the Badass Strategies by Network Nova. Fennell now serves as one of the hosts on the Friday Powered Lunch. Fennell's 26 years as a service executive at Bank of America provides her with a wealth of experience and knowledge to lead people with both common sense and empathy. Welcome back to the show, Fennell.
Hi, how are you? I'm really delighted to be here.
I'm
This
glad
is
I'm glad to have you back for now. So glad. And I see Zachary. He made it. He made it. I was introducing him first. I was going to let the guys go first. So let me introduce Zach. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So there he is. Zach, you made it.
Yeah, I'm actually on my phone now. I
Okay.
got my I got my better half working on the laptop.
Okay. Thank God for the better half. All right.
Amen.
Amen. Zachary, here we have Zachary Clipper Sr. He is my homeboy from Detroit. We were high school classmates. In the early 1980s, Zachary was a founding member of the Ann Arbor chapter of the National Black Independent Political Party, NBIPP. He is a Pan Africanist who believes in the unification of the Black diaspora. Zachary worked on the Obama campaign, knocking on doors and making phone calls. He is he has been involved in social media during the Harris Waltz campaign, providing pushback on disinformation and misinformation that he sees. Zachary is also providing transportation to the polls on election day. Zachary has worked professionally in television production and has spent the last 18 years in customer relations with a national grocery chain. Zachary has been a very active participant in my chats over the past year or so. And I said, Zach, with all your knowledge and stuff, I need to get you on the show as a panelist. So welcome, Zachary, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Javita Lee. All right. Dr. Javita Lee currently serves as the policy director for Advance Carolina and the program director for the North Carolina Black Alliance.
Stay with your phone or what?
Is the convener of the.
I can't give you the link.
Okay, hold on a second, Zach. Put yourself on mute. Okay. All right. Dr. Lee is the convener of the North Carolina Black and Brown Policy Network, which is a network of over 30 Black and Brown organizations across the state of North Carolina. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Javita Lee.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Always happy to have you. Okay, some people have said some things in the chat. I'm going to put it up there. 2 more days. Woo, 2 more. We hope. All right. Hey there, Renee and Edwin Presley. 2 Detroiters, the Lions best and the Packers in Green Bay. Edwin, we're not talking about sports. Zach, you know that's, listen, Detroit men, got to get on the sports game. Okay. Listen, I want to start with you, Zach. You being in the state of Michigan, my homeboy from Detroit, we know that Michigan is a swing state. We know that Michigan has the largest Arab American population in the country. And the war in Gaza is a major concern to that demographic. And it's a definite issue for the Harris Walz campaign, quite frankly. So give us some ideas as to what is going on there. What's the scuttlebutt? What are you hearing?
Well, as you know, they originally started out as being uncommitted because of Biden-Harris policy in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
But a recent poll said that there's still like 41% of the Muslim community that's supporting Harris, but 43% they said was going to vote for Jill Stein. And I'm not sure, why they would just want to waste their vote. And then you have the suburb of Hamtramck, which is now, it used to be predominantly Polish. Now it's predominantly Muslim.
I heard
from people from Bangladesh, and the mayor of Hamtramck endorsed Donald Trump based on Donald Trump telling him that he would end the war. And I was like, how could you do that? Accept the word of a man who instituted the Muslim ban.
Exactly. That's the thing. I don't understand that lack of knowledge or lack of memory. So Zach, what is being done, to counteract that type of narrative,
Well, I know Harris has reached out to the Muslim community, and she's trying to mend fences, but it's a difficult mend. But still, I think that in the end, I'm hoping that they would come around and decide that Harris would be a better fit than Trump, because Trump has already told Netanyahu to finish the job. So, I mean, it would be like black people going to the Klan for help against the Republican Party.
Right. Exactly. That's a very good analogy. Very good analogy. And it's really scary too, because we also have in Michigan, not too far away in the suburbs, we have a large Hasidic Jewish community too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the Detroit area is interesting. That's the best adjective I can use. Interesting. When it comes to this election, and I just don't know. I don't know if the Harris Walz people have gotten any surrogates or anybody to come into the area maybe
Well,
to go
they
ahead.
had a rally the other day, and this is the home of Rashida Tlaib.
Yes.
But from my understanding, that Rashida Tlaib talked about all the down ballot people and didn't mention Kamala Harris at all.
Oh.
So I know she's upset, and I can understand her upsetness. But in this critical election, I can't see how anybody could sit on the sideline.
No. No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I tell you. Well. Oh, and the chats. People are saying everything. Let's see here. Cognitive dissonance is not just for MAGA. That's true. Willful ignorance, that's what it is. They have a Trump campaign headquarters in Hamtramck. Oh gosh. I believe it. If the mayor is advocating for it, I believe that. Fennell, I'm going to you next. I feel like I don't hear very much about Virginia, Fennell, in the national news, that is. These days, and I'm certain that there's got to be something going on. Are there any significant ballot issues going on in Virginia that we should know about, or are that of particular concern there in Virginia?
Yeah, there are a couple of things, but if I could, I'd like to go back and just talk about Michigan for 60 seconds.
Oh, sure.
So, it's really interesting when you're sort of watching it from afar, but the implications will be really big for all of us across the country. And I
Right.
think when I talk to my husband, who's military, and he sort of helps me understand sometimes the things that make little sense. And,
Mhm.
and what he says is that really, when you're trying to think about what happens in Israel versus what happens here, and then all of the complexities that happen with the Middle East, that is a
Mhm.
really, really difficult situation, and that it's hard to find a win-win situation or solution. And so I
Mhm.
think that that's why the administration is struggling so, is because it's so hard to grapple, and because it's not an issue that Biden, Harris, or anybody was going to be able to solve in this election cycle. And
No.
so I think that the Trump administration, as well as Netanyahu, really play into that, and they really play into the hopelessness of the people who are of Arab descent, who are struggling with the number of people who are dying in Gaza. So I
Mhm.
don't think it's easy. I don't think it's ignorance. I think it's just a difficult solution. And I do think that's why the Harris campaign is working so hard with building these other coalitions with Republicans, moderate Republicans, because you have to try to close the gaps where you can. So that's my little 2 cents worth on that. But
Uh-huh.
in terms of Virginia, we have had some interesting things go on. Initially, it was Virginia was all good, and then all of a sudden we turned into a swing state. And
Uh,
then now we're not a swing state anymore. We're just working really hard. But we
uh-huh.
do have some really important congressional seats that we're working to hold. We're
Okay.
working to hold 7, we're working to hold 9, and we really want to win back 2, which is Jane Kiggins. It was Elaine Luria, who everyone knew from J6, as
Uh,
well as, yeah, as well as a seat and CD1, which is Leslie Mehta. I think you know her. And she, no one was really looking at those seats, but because of redistricting,
mhm.
these have become opportunities. So
Yeah.
that's important. But the big news was when Youngkin was uh, removing people from the ballots, from the oh,
Polls.
from the voter files.
Mhm.
And that became a really big issue. And of course, the Department of Justice sued.
Mhm.
And we won in the lower courts, but then the Supreme Court overturned it. And it was about 6,000 people, somewhere between 1,600 and 6,000 people. The
Mhm.
reason that they were removed is because of an old law in 2006, I think. But the point was, you have to remove them in a certain period of time. You can't wait until 30 days, 60 days before the election and start removing people from the files. But
Mhm.
anyhow, it went to the Supreme Court and they overruled it. And the reason that they overruled it was because they said we have same day. You can register and vote on the same day, and because of that reason,
Mhm.
they overruled it. Now, Mark Elias tells us not to worry. He says that that's not going to have a big implication on this election, and he also says for all of those who are here and available, just register and vote on the same day. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to just continue working hard up until 8 o'clock when the polls close.
Okay. So you guys get to register and vote even on election day?
even on election day.
Wow. Okay. Because we can do that here. It ended during early voting, which ended was it yesterday?
Yesterday for us, yesterday, November 2nd.
Yeah, yesterday for us at 3 o'clock. You had to be in the line by 3 o'clock in order to early vote and register here in the state of North Carolina. So I tell you, it's we've had great turnout, but I feel like with people being removed from the polls, it's always important to do things early, so you can be prepared to correct anything that you need to correct, right? So, to Dr. Lee in the state of North Carolina. Oh, North Carolina is on my mind. Dr. Lee, we got a whole bunch of issues here in North Carolina. Oh my gosh. I've got cousins that call me regularly and say, "What are you all doing?" They see an ad on our Black Nazi, our gentleman who is running for governor, and they're like, "Pam, what is going on down there?" They just can't believe it. And then they've heard about the woman who's running for superintendent of schools, and she's threatened. She made a horrible threat. I felt it was a threat against President Obama, and yet people are able to say these things without any problems or issues. Dr. Lee, tell us what's going on in North Carolina and how are we looking?
Yeah, so I mean, all of the things that you've mentioned are absolutely true. We definitely have a lot of characters here in the state of North Carolina. I think, something that we're seeing, for example, is, what you referenced, which was the superintendent of public instruction. That race is actually getting a whole lot of attention, a lot more than normal, just simply because of the nature of who the two candidates are. I know that we also have a hyper focus on education right now, which is what's making that office so important as well, because I know, this year our governor declared it as a year of public schools, but also we've seen a lot of legislation here in the state that has gone directly against our public schools, thinking about HB 10, which originally was only a bill around immigration and requiring local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE, but then they decided that it made complete sense to them to also throw in public school vouchers to that same exact piece of legislation. And we know that the funding for those vouchers will come from public schools. And so, a lot of folks are paying attention to who is going to take over that particular role. And so we are seeing some down ballot energy here. At the close of early voting, we were seeing high numbers. Over 4 million North Carolinians have took advantage of early voting this year, which is quite high for us. And so we are seeing, to your point, high energy in regards to folks getting out and voting. But to your other point, it's like we are still slightly holding our breath for election day as well. But in regards to the grassroots energy and the efforts that are taking place on the ground, I mean, folks are out here working, not just our two organizations, but our whole coalition. I mean, we've been working overtime, as folks know. We operate, the North Carolina arm of the National Voter Hotline. We saw some data, I think, yesterday evening or first thing this morning, and our state was the highest when it came to us operating and taking calls and just troubleshooting things that are going on at the polls. And so, like I said, our coalition of folks have been working, I mean, between strolls to the polls, souls to the polls, party at the polls. I mean, we've been doing everything that we can to try to keep the morale up, especially because, again, it was such a high turnout for early voting. Lines were a little bit longer, and we wanted to encourage folks to wait. And so if it took us having a party at the polls and having free food for folks, staying in line and voting, then that's what it took. And so we, have been putting forth our best effort to keep the energy high, to make sure that folks are, engaged and excited about this election, because we know, just a few months ago, even having this conversation just a few months ago with you, how the morale has shifted, because definitely at the beginning, it was tough to try to get folks motivated about this election, especially our young folks. But now we're seeing record numbers, even with our HBCUs. As we know, North Carolina is the HBCU state. And so we are seeing our HBCUs actually break their 2020 records already. even with Winston-Salem State, already 61% of their voting population has already voted in early voting, which we have not seen before. And so we are proud of our students. We are proud of our young adults. Yeah, we're pushing. And so we're so proud. I think Winston-Salem State is in the lead, followed by Central, my alma mater, and then also A&T. So we are in love with what we're seeing, but definitely took the hard work of the folks on the ground to push these folks to the polls.
Yes. Gen Z is, listen, I love my Gen Zers. I think that we have, there's one that, are you a Gen Z, Dr. Lee?
No, I'm a millennial, a baby millennial, but a millennial nonetheless.
Because Greer Webb, who I've had on this show several times, I call him my favorite Gen Zers. And that generation, they understand the assignment. They are, listen, they are sick of hiding in classrooms doing drills for shooting and things like that. They're sick of it. They want this, they want change in this nation. They are demanding it. And I'm all for it. Go for it, go for it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Zachary, you're going to be, tell me about this ride sharing situation that you're going to do for on election day. How are you arranging it? Are you doing it through your church, another organization? How are you going to do that for the people?
We're doing it through the local Democratic Party.
Okay.
We're just volunteering to drive anybody who calls up to the headquarters and say they can't make it to the polls because they don't have transportation.
Okay. Okay. So you guys are acting like a dispatch Uber system for vote, just going to the polls, just getting people.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Very good. Very good. Now, do they have any type of special precautions for you guys? Because listen, we have to be careful these days about where we're picking up or whatever, because people are really mean. So you gotta, be careful while you're doing it. It's a good thing, but be careful while you're doing it too, right? Let's see. In the chat, someone asked about Western North Carolina, Dr. Lee. Are the people in Western counties, and I'm sure she's able to get to the polls. We use churches, and some of those have been closed. I think she's asking about our Western North Carolina, and that it was just horrifically devastated during Helene. Can you speak to that? How that's going? Do you know?
Yeah, we are seeing Western North Carolina folks get out to vote. Board of Elections worked overtime to try to get a lot of those early voting sites replaced with other sites. And so I would definitely just, encourage, and then also election day sites as well. So please, check out the Board of Elections website for that full list for Tuesday. But yes, our Board of Elections did work day and night to try to identify new sites that folks could take advantage of early voting. And so from what we were able to tell, we were seeing Western North Carolinians being able to go out, take advantage of those new sites, access those new sites as well. And so, of course, we know that, the numbers are going to look a little different for this year, but we were seeing folks actually be able to access the polls during early voting, which was one of our main concerns. We did not want that portion of the state to lose out on that opportunity. And so we were able to identify several new early voting locations for folks to take advantage of.
Okay. Some other Gastonia, North Carolina, primary of Red County, but we did have high Democratic turnout, black and white. Okay, Loretta lives in Gastonia. Gastonia, for those of you who don't know, isn't too far from Charlotte. How far is it from Charlotte, Dr. Lee, would you say?
Yes. I think about 40-ish minutes to an hour. It's not too far. Yeah, it's not too far.
Okay. Sincere here says Michigan Muslims back Trump. Is silly seeing that he won't change anything with how the U.S. funds and arms Israel. The problem VP Harris has is that this massacre is occurring under this administration. This is true. I don't, you know what, guys? I attempted to go on YouTube and to do some research on that whole, how in the world did we get into this situation in the first place with Israel and the Palestine and all the conflict and what have you. And I did find old black and white footage from when President Truman, no, was it Truman? Yeah, I'm gonna get the names mixed up what president it was. But at any rate, the president who was in office at that time, he actually discusses with maps and everything how this whole thing came about, because the nation of Israel is only what's about 75 years old. So it's a very complex and troubling situation, how it got started and all of that. It is, if you go on YouTube, they literally have old historical documents on that.
Yeah, if I could, Pam, what I
Vanessa.
would say, yeah, thank you, is the history is, and that's, I think, the problem that a lot of people have, young and old, and probably some Muslims as well, just because, like us with our Black history, is that oftentimes people don't really fully understand the history or fully know the history of how some of these things come about, which makes this situation so complex. And I don't know. I know I don't know the right answer, but I also know that I don't know all of the things that happen in terms of how the Middle East operates. And I think the country itself has made a lot of decisions about that in the past that may have not been the right decisions. And so I think that that Netanyahu as well as Trump feed on that. And to me, it's no different than, Black voters who support Trump. I don't feel that it's any different in terms of understanding what he actually does and what he actually thinks about us as a people in terms of why we would actually support him. So I think it's a really gnawing situation. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the other things that are happening across Virginia.
Okay.
And some of the things that we're doing that I'm really excited about. So I get the pleasure of working with another organization. It's called Rural Ground Game. That I'm from a very rural community. And what they do is that they really come in and they help you understand what's happening in your community, so that all of the knowledge that comes from the bottom up and not from the top down. Because we know that the party itself has been skeptical about how much they've invested in rural communities, because they really didn't think that it mattered a lot. They focus on suburbs and urban areas. But what we know is at the end of the day, when it comes to votes at the top of the house, you need all of those votes at the bottom, and they need to add up. So I think there's been a really deep learning there. So what Rural Ground Game has done is, even in communities as small as mine, but all the way up to Pennsylvania, is they listen to us to say, what is it that you all need? You know how we always say yard signs don't vote? But yard signs do vote. They tell people something. They give cues about what the enthusiasm level is for a certain party. And we know we talk about enthusiasm all the time. And if you are an enthusiastic Democrat, or you're enthusiastic about the candidate, you want to put a sign in your yard to tell everybody that, so that you can start letting people see that. So they helped us get yard signs, but not just any yard signs. For our rural communities, they're green and white. They look like fences, and they say, Democrats fix roads and feed children. And so they're very positive, optimistic, big old giant signs that the Republicans are having a heyday about, because they just can't believe that we have taken signs that look like tractor signs. And then the other thing that they were able to do is help us get billboards. And so people were complaining in Pennsylvania about all of the Trump billboards that were all along. Well, in my little community, we have 5 billboards, one on Social Security, one on feeding children, and another one on we're not going back, because even in our rural community, we're talking about reproductive health. And all of these things came about because of Rural Ground Game and the investment that they made, not just in my community, but communities rural across all of Virginia, and in communities even in Pennsylvania. So we're pretty excited about that.
That's very exciting, because I know in North Carolina we have a rural North Carolina is very rural. I mean, I don't live in a rural area because girlfriend couldn't hang in a rural area, but I'm just saying that our the head of our Democratic Party at Anderson Clayton, she is from a rural area, and she has made it her mission early on to get that rural game going. Dr. Lee, you want to comment on that, about the rural game in North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, as we know, it's no secret, like, it is going to take our rural communities to help us see it through. And, thinking about the magnitude of our rural population, we're over 80% rural as a state. And so the rural vote, rural communities, that's where, the majority of us have been organizing, but not just about this particular election, but all year investment. I have seen a shift in a lot of organizations that have taken the time to have intentional investment in these communities, because that's what's missing. A lot of times we come in around August, September, and it's like, oh my gosh, we care so much about rural communities. Why'd you care about us in March or April? Because we still have the same issues that we're talking about today in those months. And so what we've seen is this consistent effort from organizations, like ours, but others as well, around the year-round 365 organizing engagement in these communities. So that way we're pulling folks in, not just about, cast your ballot, but we're talking about the issues that are impacting them. And I think that approach is what we're seeing, not just, through the party and other efforts, but also just all across the board. So thinking about, pulling folks in the conversation when you're thinking about environmental justice. We know that environmental injustice, and that, first of all, the whole movement started in North Carolina, in Warren County, but then also folks are still experiencing those injustices today. The impacts of those, thinking about access to healthcare. I mean, we've had over 11 rural hospital closures in the last decade. So we're having the real conversations with rural communities about the real issues that are going on that just so happen to be reflected on the ballot for this year, because the positions that we're seeing, the folks that, we will be electing into office are going to have a deep hand into what that reality will look like 2025 and moving forward. And so I think, that, consistent effort to make sure we're having these real conversations with rural communities is what's going to pull us through.
Was that as I'm listening to Dr. Lee and Fennell talk about this rural type of movement, I wonder, even though, Hamtramck and those places are not rural, they are specialized in the sense of the majority of the people who live there. And I'm wondering if that is the tactic that the party needs to take, a 365 approach to them as well, especially with this war. I don't, you know what I'm saying? Maybe.
Well, I think in the past, Hamtramck was like a Democratic stronghold before this election, but I have some Bangladesh friends, and I could say that they have a strong desire to have a proximity to whiteness sometimes, and they will accept things from white people that they would never accept from another minority, and they believe things from white people that they would never believe from another culture either. So what happens is Donald Trump comes in and says, I'm going to stop the war. I give you my word. And what is Donald Trump's word worth?
Nothing.
You're right. So, but I'm glad to see that there's a good rural outreach in those areas, because I know when you say rural in the southern area, that still means, minority people of color. But when you say rural in Michigan, most of the time, most of the ruralness is in the other culture. So you have, like, I live on the border of Wayne County and Washtenaw County, and there's some rural areas near me. And when I go out in the rural areas, all I see is Trump signs. Trump, Trump, Trump. It's probably 10-1 when you go out in the rural areas. So, but Obama won his first election by having a good ground game. But the question now is, will a good ground game overcome the racial divide that we're going through right now?
Because of the war, because of Gaza.
Not only because of Gaza, but just this country has never been this divided. And lots of times, I know when the pre-paperwork you had, you said you were skeptical of the national media and corporate media.
Yeah.
Well, they refuse to say the elephant in the room, which is race. Because in this country, the things that are going on, that Trump gets away with, have never been accepted in the past. Never. If you denigrated a veteran like John McCain, your campaign would have been over. If you took 5 deferments, your campaign would have been over. But now you have veterans for Trump, and the only explanation is race. You know?
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, you are right, Zachary. It has been the thing that people have been afraid to talk about because it is the big elephant in the room. And I think Steve Phillips, if you guys have read any of his stuff, Democracy in Color, talks a lot about this. And it's so good and it's so profound. But also, Isabel Wilkerson was on a show recently, and she talked about really what this is all about, because you sort of scratch your head and you look at Trump and you listen to him, and you know that anybody with good sense cannot believe what this man is saying. We have generals who are saying that he is incompetent and should not be here, and people are still there. So what is it? And what Isabel Wilkerson says is what we all know, that is 2042, when what's going to change is the makeup of this country. When it will no longer be a majority white country, it will be a multiracial country. And so therefore people are picking their sides, and they're picking where they want to be because they feel like it's something they must do. But there is enough of us to overcome that. And that's what this election in 2024 will do. And to Zachary's point, I also want to make is in our rural communities where I am and in Virginia, in my rural community, we are 26% people of color and Black. And so that makes a difference. So you do have to have the right messenger for the right group, which means that you got to talk to the people who look like you, who you listen to, who you will believe what they're saying. And I think that's the biggest opportunity. It's one of the big trends is that people are made up of so many different groups and tribes that you need to be sure that you are talking to those tribes in the way that they need to be spoken to so that the messages are delivered.
Right. I also think that race is so powerful that some people don't even realize that it's race that's motivating them. They just have a visceral connection to Trump. And then they'll say, well, he speaks his mind. Well, what he speaks is just gibberish. You know, so speaking your mind don't really mean anything except for they feel that connection that he says things that I really want to say. You know, I really want to, you know, call somebody an N-word or, you know, and the way they mistreated Black women, well, the way Trump mistreated so many Black female reporters, that would never have been that would never have been tolerated in the past. But he gets
away with everything. It's like if there is, and I've put some things to show in the show about that. It's like nothing ever goes. Renee Shaw brought up a good point, and I just heard this before I started the show about the Ann Sizer poll in Iowa about how it looks like our girl, you know, that she's leading, and it's such a big shock because normally they're just really surprised. And so speaking of surprises, do you feel, Dr. Lee, that we're going to be in for a surprise on November 5th? Do you think that things are really as close as they are, or will we be pleasantly surprised? Will we be surprised?
I mean, my energy is definitely hoping we'll be pleasantly pleased and have a good fit. The way that things are going now, I mean, a lot of things are still in the margin of error, so I wouldn't even feel confident to call it, of course, but the direction that we're going and the turnout that we're seeing and the historic numbers that we're already hitting, it's looking like it's going to go in a positive direction. And so I'm just hoping that that does not drop off on election day. Now, one thing that we have seen that I can speak to is that a lot of our community members are holding out for election day. And we've heard that straight from folks' mouth, you know, canvassing and other things, folks that may have considered early voting before. They were like, I want to wait till election day. Some folks that normally wait till election day, like for tradition or those types of reasons, or I want to take my whole family, they're holding out for election day as well. And so we have heard that a few times over. And so if we're already hitting historic numbers now, and then we know that we have the holdouts, so to speak, that want to do this on election day and don't want to do it another day, hopefully it'll get us through. But that's the hope. And that's what we're holding on to.
Yeah, I actually had an absentee ballot, and I waited till early voting so that I could take the ballot in and put it in the tabulator myself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of North Carolinians did that too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I say that they're advising to take the ballots in. You make sure you put it in yourself, you know, the way things are going. Fennell, did you see this question that Shoei Howie has here? About
Yes, he says that it's called Rural Ground Game.
Yeah.
So you can look them up. It's www.ruralgroundgame.org. Is that right, Lindley? She's here with me today because she works really hard. But here's what I wanted to say about what I'm feeling about the election, and Lindley says nauseated nervousness, so nauseating optimism. So that's one thing. But what I would say is this: I had the great fortune of interviewing Tom Bonnier about 2 weeks ago. And I was really excited from Target Smart because I really wanted to ask him and really get a feel and sense from him of what he's thinking about the election and what we should be watching for. Because he was one of the few folks who called the 22 election that there was not going to be a red wave. Tom Bonnier and Simon Rosenberg, along with Steve Phillips. And what he says is that they look at the registrations, and on the Republican side, the registrations might look like they're good, and then the early voting might look that it's good, but it's the same people. And for us, our registrations have been predominantly women, and they're new. And so that is something that we can look at with some real optimism. Okay. And I think the other thing that I worry about is I think we were so burned in 2016 that we're afraid to be optimistic, and they tell us not to pay any attention to the polls. But what I can say is we've never seen these groups before. We've never seen this win with Black women. We've never seen this white women for Harris and white dudes for Harris and this group for Harris and evangelicals for Harris. And it's like all of these groups are coming together, and we've never seen this many Republicans endorse someone. We don't know what that's going to be, but we've never seen that before. So I have a hard time looking at polls when I do see them that say 49-49, and we have all of these groups that we've never seen before. So in my view, what I feel inside of me is that it's going to be a landslide. But then you listen to these folks who are supposed to know, and I wonder if they're just hedging to keep us from getting excited.
Right. And I don't know. That's what I'm saying about this corporate media thing, because it's just really some sketchy things that I feel that have with narratives that I'm like, come on, guys, you're not, the way they're covering Trump and covering Harris is night and day. It's night and day. And I have a few examples for you I want to show tonight.
While you're pulling those examples, one of the things that we also know is that the right floods the zone with all of these polls to sort of get people feeling disenfranchised and like, oh, we're so far behind. Why do we vote? Because so that is really real. So
here, can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, Trump's unhinged closing message at a rally in Pennsylvania today. He said he shouldn't have left the White House after the 2020 election, and said he wouldn't mind if his supporters shot the press. Okay.
Well, I think Trump's internal polling has indicated that he's in trouble, and it's interesting that the state that he picked for voter fraud was Pennsylvania, because he had offended all the Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. So he planted the seed of voter fraud in Pennsylvania. But in Michigan, we had a Chinese student at the University of Michigan vote illegally, and he's been arrested.
What was that all about? What possessed him to do that? Just A prank, or what was that all about, Zach?
It wasn't a prank, and he was questioned more than one time about his citizenship. My guess is that he probably works for the Chinese government. And if I was the state of Michigan, I would prosecute him. I think the maximum is 5 years. I would give him the 5 years and then deport him. But we had that problem, so you can expect to hear more about that if Trump loses. But I'm optimistic that we'll have a blue wave as well, all the way down the ballot.
Okay, okay, Zach. You're making my heart palpitate a little bit. I'm happy. That makes me happy. Here's a good question. Which swing states do you all think VP Harris will win? MSNBC was in panic mode on Friday. Who wants to take that question first? You want to take it, Fennell or Dr. Lee? Dr. Lee's sneezing. Who wants to take it first? Fennell? You're on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry about that. So you have to sort of take MSNBC with a grain of salt sometimes, because they really do get you all panicked. And I'm just going to follow. If you guys don't read Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles, I am going to suggest that when you hang up tonight, that you Google it and find it. Hopium Chronicles. He's a Substack, but there's a lot that you can read. It is very, very positive, but it's the truth. And so he really sort of tells you when to panic and when to just keep your head down and keep working. And so in terms of the swing states, I can't tell you which ones, because they're all over the place, but we know that she's got to win them in order to win. So we're already optimistic. But what I would say is that, we just got to keep our head down. I know, Pam, listening to you, you're worried about Michigan a lot. And I worry about it too. I worry about them all because people just have to come out and vote. But what I would say is that we have to keep working until the very last moment. And that means I'm surprised tonight. I've been doing my work with my Reach app, and I'm surprised at the number of people who haven't voted yet, or who I thought were regular voters and they didn't vote in the last election. And so you'll be surprised. And so my point is that you have no idea the one or two people that you might send a text message to or talk to that just have no idea about what's going on, because they're not as engaged in all this stuff. You think everybody knows what you know.
Yeah.
8 out of 10 of them have no idea what you know. So texting and calling, emailing your friends and family of just about how important this is, and just give them a little sliver of something that they need to know. I tell all my friends who I text message to, and I say, hey, this is a really important election. I don't want to wait until I'm 70 to get my Social Security. So will you please just go out and vote for me? And so anything that just sort of lightens the mood a little, but just gets people into the mindset that this is an important to do over the next couple of days, that they need to be ready on Tuesday.
Right. And I thought this is an interesting question in the chat. The right has an early voting strategy to get an early lead and use that to say he was cheated if he loses. What do you think about that, Dr. Lee?
I think that is accurate. Because honestly, they have been utilizing, that's one of the things that we've talked about in some of our just kind of like data meetings and things of that nature was, there has been an uptick in early voting from the other side, which is not normal. They are historically, especially in North Carolina, an election day voting population. And so we can see just by the numbers, the increase for, that side of the aisle to vote early. And to go ahead and try to push those numbers up. And so we definitely are seeing numbers that really aren't comparable to 2020 and before, because, now there's this strategy to be like, push out the early voting, get folks to the polls early, which historically has not been a part of their strategy in years previous. So yeah, we're seeing it in real time.
What do you ladies think about the commercial where they telling women to go into the vote and vote how they feel? Don't worry about their husbands, because they'll never know.
So you guys will laugh at this, and I tell everybody that I want all my money for that. So for the last 3 years, the last elections, that I have been telling people, I would say to them, I'd have a little sticky on my wall that said, "Hey guys, we need to tell all women that their vote is private, because they need to know that no one knows how they vote." Now, I will tell you that it's a bigger issue for white women. Oh, yeah, it's a bigger issue for white women than it is for Black women, because we just tend to do what we want to do. But
Right.
but really, there have been homes where you go and you canvass the door, the husband won't even let you get in, because we know they won't even let you talk to the wife. We vote Republican here, and so we have to let them know that their vote is private. So we have been doing this for a while. I'm so surprised that the Harris administration has picked it up, and it's on TV, it's on commercials, but we've been talking about it for years. And here is our ad that we put in the paper, in our local paper.
Your body.
Your vote is private. Your vote is private. Your body should be too.
Oh, okay. I see it. Okay. All right.
So full page ad
All
with the support and help of Rural Ground Game. So
right.
so we have just, we don't know how it's going to turn out. All we know is that we didn't leave anything unturned, that we didn't leave anything on the field. We have done all that we can do. And the point is, if it doesn't work this time, we know to do those things, and we'll figure out some more of those. And we're going to do phone banking tomorrow night to make sure that the very last women who haven't gotten out to vote, we're going to call them too. And as someone said today, you do all you can, and then it's up to everybody to go out and vote and do their part. But yes, it's for white women. We have the little stickies. We stick those in bathrooms everywhere that says your vote is private. Post-it notes. Do you have my post-it notes? Oh, I'm going to show you those too.
Yeah.
You just stick these in the bathroom.
Oh,
in the stalls everywhere.
That's a good thing. And you know what the thing is, and I never forget when they did Win with White Women. I made sure I was on that call, because I was curious, because remember how all of them came out after the 2016 election with those pink hats on, and then we saw statistically that over 55% of Caucasian women had voted for Trump, and we're like, how y'all gonna come out crying and complaining with the pussycat hats on, and you voted for them? And they swore up and down in that White Women for Trump call. They said they knew that they had messed up. And they're the largest constituency to vote. So my thing is, I sincerely hope that they stick to their word, and that they realize it is in their best interest. I mean, because look at the mess that we're in. Look at how many women have died unnecessarily because they're septic and they couldn't get treatment because a doctor's afraid he'll be sued or whatever, lose his license. And not to mention some of the women that they got septic and then they lost their ability to have children anymore. It's just awful.
Those stories, I was going to say, those stories have been huge, and I hope that you all are sharing those stories. They are available through Dimcast, through social media, and they are important to share to your friends and your family and to everybody who would be influenced by them, so that they can actually see and feel what people are actually going through. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that's really important about this is that, we don't have a choice but to tell these stories and to talk about it. And I think the only way you can do that is through social media. Zachary, I heard you say that earlier. Mm-hmm. You were trying to get rid of, push down social media. And that's one of the things we do at Dimcast, is really 200 billion views and since 2019. But it's a way to fight back on social media to ensure that the right things, that people are seeing the right information. And I thought you said this about your Gen Z, Pam, earlier, is that they are seeing the video for the very first time of Trump and the grabbing women by the pee. And they are really reacting very strongly to that. They can't believe that we actually put someone in office after having that kind of behavior. So I think people need to see him and to understand how awful he really is.
Yeah, and then the women that, I'm going to protect you whether they like it or not. I mean, really, dude? Really? I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, much as I dislike Nikki Haley, she has been trying to warn Trump that 53% of the electorate is women. So all this time he's spending talking about transgender and running his Kamalas for transgender 30,000 times and all this stuff. He's ignoring women on a lot of issues, and it's going to come back to bite him. Hopefully.
Yeah, the other thing that's so interesting about just bringing up Nikki Haley, what a disappointment. She, I didn't have a dog in a fight for her one way or the other, but I thought that she might be what I call a reasonable Republican, that she would be someone that you could reason with and we could reach compromise. But when she flipped the script and went for Trump, I was like, girl, what are you doing? Because I thought she was a lot more savvy than that. I really thought she would stand her ground because she had run a good campaign.
I knew all along she was going to come around and kiss the ring.
Really?
Yeah, because there's money involved. When she, at one time she was bankrupt, but somehow she got on all these corporate boards and different things, and now she's like a millionaire. So if she alienated the Trump base, then he would have the power to contact some of these places that might be thinking about putting her on some board and say, no, she double crossed me, and even though she kissed the ring, he hasn't had anything to do with her.
He sure hasn't.
He hasn't had anything to do with her. Because once you cross him, that's it.
Yeah. That's true. Renee Schultz says that, y'all, the new voter registration rolls are massive and they aren't being captured in most polls. That's a good point. Very good point. I forgot about that, Renee.
That's what I was talking about with Simon and Tom Bonnier in terms of the registrations, especially for Black women, young Black women. And so, there's a whole bunch of little anecdotal things that that are happening here. And that's why it's probably this, no one wants to say what's actually going to happen because we don't know. We just have optimism.
All right.
Well, I would beg people, even if she wins, I would beg Black people to be very careful after the election for at least a month, because there's going to be violence. I know it. So, and what I've seen is that a lot of these people are attacking Black women and Black children. They haven't attacked so many Black men, but they have, been attacking Black women and children and stuff. I see it on the internet. A lot of things that happen in America, because it only happens in one place, the majority of the people don't see what happens. But if you're active on TikTok, you see a lot of things that don't come to light right away, but eventually come to light. But people who are active on TikTok, they see it a lot earlier. So there was some kid they were harassing because he was walking through a neighborhood which he lived in, and they were just, one guy went into his car and got a gun, and they had to talk him down from pulling the gun on the kid.
What?
But because of the people on TikTok, not only they located him, identified who he was, sent the information to his employer, and he got fired.
I hadn't heard about that.
Because this was in a private, it might have been a gated community, and they were just walking behind him. It was like three white guys. I think it was in Florida. What do you live here? What are you doing here? Why are you here? Answer me. And he was like, man, I don't have to answer anything. And then the one guy went to his car, got out of his car and went around to the passenger side and got his gun, and they, talked him out of it. And those things are happening a lot more than what you see on the national media.
Right. Right. I hadn't heard about that at all, Zach. How long ago was this?
This was like in the last 2 weeks.
Wow, I hadn't heard it. Had not heard it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not that you hear everything, you're right, but there's a lot going on. And I mean, we know that's the one reason why I was thinking, well, God, if you just would make it so it just as a blowout, then it may not be so much pushback. And we could really have 2 days and enjoy and celebrate and have our celebration parties and virtual and in person and the whole thing and enjoy the moment. And if not, we'll, we do need to be vigilant. We do need to be vigilant. That's just
because there's some fear. I have a Waltz Harris Waltz sign in my yard, and my next door neighbor has a Harris Waltz sign in their yard. But my neighbor across the street, he told me that he was actually scared to put up a sign. And I said, well, I'm not scared. I'm not running from anybody. But, that's the kind of situation we're in now. People have posted on social media that, put those signs out so we can remember where you live.
Yeah.
But I don't, a lot of people are just keyboard cowboys. So they're tough on because the majority of them don't have a profile picture or whatever. And a lot of times on social media, it's hard to distinguish between who's a bot and who's real.
Right.
But I noticed that no matter what, there was a rapper named D1 who came on and tried to talk black men into voting for Harris. And as soon as he posted it, it was just full of white people telling him why he was wrong. He was, out of touch. He didn't know what he was talking about. And it's ridiculous at times. And Trump loves the uneducated, black and white.
Yeah.
Because at some point, the conspiracy theories intersect for these groups. Sadly.
Right. That's right. Well, you know what? You are I know for a fact that Zach is definitely on his game on social media. Because he'll tag me on certain things, and I'm like, Zach, I can't even do another thing to look at anything else because I'm busy too. But I tell you, it has been so much. Just think the next time I see any of you guys on the internet streets, we will have an answer as to who won and what our country looks like or whatever. Before we wrap up and end, each of you tell me what it is that you hope for. Dr. Lee, I'll start with you first. What do you hope for after this election?
I hope that folks remain committed to the work. The election is critically important. Do not get me wrong. But again, my focus is 365. We have years to come. I'm already thinking about 2025. I'm thinking about community level needs. And so I'm just hoping that regardless of Tuesday, folks remain committed to the work that has to be done regardless.
All right. Fennell, what do you hope for?
Well, I hope I don't have to go to Belize, but
I've got a cousin
I hear it's beautiful.
That's going to Mexico and staying until spring, and she's a veteran. Her brother told me today. He said she's getting out of here, Pam. She can't take it.
So that is my chosen destination. But here's what I hope for. I have this nervousness. I just can't see it's going any other way. But what I hope most for is education. I am with Dr. Lee, is that we cannot let this be something that happens, every 4 years. We have an election every year in Virginia. That is the way that's the way that it rolls here. And I think that folks have to have a better understanding of how democracy works. We are so uneducated about how bills get passed, what the Congress does, what the Senate does, what happens in our states. we have just got to do better than that. So I am just hoping that we will have an opportunity to just sort of, have a glow in this moment. And then let's just get to work on 365 days and educating our people about how democracy works.
Right. Amen. Amen to that. Well, guys, we're at the end of our show. I appreciate you all so much for being on the show. Zach, I'm glad you made it on with the help of your helpmate to get you on the show. And I'm thankful, so thankful for all of you. And listen, guys, we say our prayers and keep working, keep talking, keep texting, keep phoning, keep whatever you're doing. And Zach, be careful taking people on rides to the polls. Okay.
Oh,
All right.
no
Okay.
problem.
All right. So let's wave off. Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.